The discovery. Ethan Carter wasn't the kind of kid who spent his days glued to a screen or holed up inside. At just 10 years old, he found joy in the simple things: a shiny pebble, the rustling of leaves in the wind, or the excitement of finding odd treasures in the park near his home. Life in his small town didn't offer much in the way of excitement, but Ethan had an imagination big enough to make any ordinary day feel like an adventure. His family didn't have much money, but his parents, Sarah and Michael, raised him with values that mattered more than wealth: honesty, kindness, and the belief that doing the right thing was its own reward. It was a late autumn afternoon when Ethan stumbled upon the object that would change everything. The sun was just beginning to dip below the horizon, casting a soft golden glow over the park. Leaves, crisp and colorful, crunched beneath his sneakers as he walked along his usual path. He loved this time of day, when the world felt calm, and the sky painted itself in hues of orange and pink. Ethan's eyes were always on the lookout for interesting things. Sometimes it was a feather, other times a coin someone had dropped. But today, as he kicked at a pile of leaves near an old wooden bench, something shiny caught his attention. Nestled between the fallen leaves and a patch of dirt was what looked like a bracelet or maybe a watch. He knelt down, brushing the debris aside, and picked it up. It wasn't just any watch. The moment it touched his hand, he could feel its weight and quality. The strap was made of sleek black leather, and the watch face was framed in polished gold. The glass was smooth, without a single scratch, and the hands ticked quietly, keeping perfect time. But what really caught Ethan's eye was the small, subtle engraving on the back. It read, "To KR, keep believing in yourself." The letters were neat and deliberate, etched into the metal with care. Ethan turned the watch over in his hands, his brow furrowed in thought. Who was KR? And why would someone with such an expensive-looking watch be in this small park in their quiet town? He looked around, half expecting someone to come running back, frantically searching for their lost item. But the park was empty now, the cool air chasing most people home for the evening. Ethan stood there for a moment, the weight of the watch feeling heavier now, not because of its physical heft, but because of what it represented. This wasn't just a toy or a trinket. Someone had lost something valuable, something that clearly meant a lot to them. For a brief second, a thought crossed his mind. What if he kept it? It was tempting. Who wouldn't want to have something so beautiful, so rare? But the idea didn't last long. His parents had always taught him better. He knew what he had to do. Clutching the watch tightly in his hand, Ethan ran home, his heart pounding not from fear, but from the strange mix of excitement and responsibility that filled his chest. When he burst through the front door, his mother was in the kitchen, stirring a pot of soup, while his father sat at the small kitchen table, flipping through the newspaper. "Mom, Dad," Ethan called out, his voice echoing through the small house. Sarah turned, concern flickering across her face at her son's urgency. "Ethan, what's wrong?" Ethan held out the watch, his eyes wide. "I found this at the park. It looks really expensive. I think someone lost it." Michael put down his newspaper and took the watch from Ethan's outstretched hand. He examined it closely, whistling low under his breath. "This is no ordinary watch," he said, turning it over to show Sarah the engraving. "It must be worth a fortune." Sarah's eyes widened. "Oh my. Ethan, where exactly did you find this?" "Near the old bench by the playground," Ethan replied. "I waited to see if anyone would come looking for it, but no one did." Michael handed the watch back to Ethan. "You did the right thing bringing it home. Tomorrow, we'll take it to the police station. Someone's bound to be looking for it." Ethan nodded, though a small part of him wished they could do something more immediately. The idea of someone out there, panicking over their lost watch, made his heart ache a little. But he trusted his parents. The police would know what to do. That night, as Ethan lay in bed, he couldn't stop thinking about the watch. The way it glimmered in the fading light, the mysterious initials on the back, and the story it might carry. Who was KR? Was it a gift from a loved one? A family heirloom? His mind raced with possibilities. He imagined grand tales of adventure, of the watch being passed down through generations or belonging to someone famous. But no matter how many stories he invented, one thought remained constant. He had done the right thing. Even if no one ever came to claim the watch, even if he never found out who it belonged to, he knew in his heart that honesty mattered. That belief was what his parents had instilled in him. And tonight, it made him feel proud. What Ethan didn't know was that his small act of integrity was about to set off a chain of events far beyond his wildest imagination. This wasn't just any watch, and its owner wasn't just any person. The simple choice Ethan made in the fading light of that autumn evening would ripple outward, touching lives in ways he couldn't yet comprehend. But for now, he drifted off to sleep with a clear conscience, unaware that the next day would bring a surprise that would change his life forever. A mysterious stranger. The next morning dawned crisp and cool, the kind of autumn day where the air felt fresh and alive, tinged with the faint scent of fallen leaves. Ethan awoke to the soft hum of his mother in the kitchen, the familiar clinking of dishes and the smell of toast filling the small house. But today felt different. The memory of the watch he'd found still lingered in his mind, as vivid as if it had just happened. The way the gold glinted in the fading sunlight, the mystery of the engraved initials, it all played over in his thoughts like a scene from a movie. He dressed quickly, pulling on his favorite hoodie and sneakers, and bounded down the stairs to find his mom, Sarah, already waiting by the door with her car keys in hand. She smiled at him, her eyes warm but filled with a hint of concern. "Ready to go, kiddo?" she asked, ruffling his hair affectionately. Ethan nodded, slipping on his backpack even though he wasn't headed to school just yet. They were going to the police station first, to turn in the watch. It felt like the right thing to do, but a part of him still felt uneasy. What if the police couldn't find the owner? What if the watch ended up sitting in some dusty evidence locker, forgotten? The drive to the station was quiet, the usual chatter between mother and son replaced by a thoughtful silence. Sarah glanced at Ethan occasionally, sensing the weight of the situation on her young son's mind. "You did a good thing, Ethan," she said gently, her voice cutting through the silence. "Not everyone would have done what you did." Ethan shrugged, staring out the window at the blur of trees and houses passing by. "It just felt right, you know." Sarah nodded, understanding more than he realized. She knew how much Ethan valued doing the right thing, even when it wasn't easy. It was a trait she admired deeply in her son, and it made her proud to see him living by the values they had taught him. When they arrived at the police station, the building loomed larger than Ethan remembered. It wasn't intimidating, exactly, but the seriousness of the place felt more real now that he was carrying something so important. They stepped inside, the door closing with a soft whoosh behind them, and approached the front desk where a uniformed officer sat, flipping through paperwork. The officer looked up, his eyes kind but curious as he took in the sight of the young boy and his mother. "Can I help you folks?" he asked, setting his papers aside. Ethan stepped forward, holding out the watch with both hands as if it were made of glass. "I found this at the park yesterday," he said, his voice steady despite the nervous flutter in his chest. "I think someone lost it." The officer's eyebrows shot up as he took the watch, turning it over in his hands. His eyes widened slightly at the sight of the engraving and the obvious craftsmanship. "This is quite the find," he murmured, glancing back at Ethan. "You said you found it at the park?" Ethan nodded, near the old bench by the playground. The officer gave a low whistle, clearly impressed. "Well, you've done the right thing bringing it here. I'll file a report and see if anyone's reported it missing. Can I get your name and contact information, just in case the owner wants to thank you?" Ethan recited his details, his heart pounding a little faster at the thought of the mysterious owner. As the officer typed everything into the system, Sarah placed a reassuring hand on Ethan's shoulder, grounding him in the moment. With the watch officially in the police's hands, Ethan and his mother left the station, stepping back into the bright morning light. As they walked to the car, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't the end of the story. Something about the watch, the engraving, its unexpected appearance in their small town, felt like the beginning of something bigger. And he was right. Meanwhile, across the city, in a quiet hotel suite far from the hustle and bustle of Hollywood, Keanu Reeves was having a morning unlike any other. Known for his grounded nature and unassuming demeanor, Keanu had come to this small town seeking a break from the relentless pace of his career. He valued these quiet escapes, moments where he could reconnect with himself, away from the flashing cameras and endless interviews. But today, his mind wasn't at ease. The night before, after returning from a peaceful walk through the park, he had realized something was missing. His heart had sunk when he checked his wrist and found it bare. The watch, a gift from his late mentor, someone who had believed in him long before the world did, was gone. It wasn't just an accessory, it was a symbol of perseverance, of belief in oneself, of the journey he'd traveled from struggling actor to beloved star. Keanu had retraced his steps that night, searching the park under the dim glow of streetlights, but the watch was nowhere to be found. By morning, the sinking feeling in his chest had only grown heavier. His assistant, Lisa, urged him to report it, though Keanu doubted it would turn up in a place like this. Still, there was a sliver of hope. By mid-morning, Lisa was on the phone, calling local police stations. Keanu sat nearby, running a hand through his dark hair, his mind racing with thoughts of the sentimental value the watch held. He barely noticed when Lisa's tone shifted from polite inquiry to surprise. "Yes, that's correct. A black leather strap with a gold frame and an engraving on the back. You found it." Lisa's eyes widened as she glanced at Keanu, a grin spreading across her face. "That's incredible. Thank you so much. We'll be there as soon as we can." Keanu's head snapped up, disbelief etched into his features. "They found it." Lisa nodded, still smiling. "You're not going to believe this. A young boy found it at the park and turned it in. His name's Ethan Carter." Keanu's lips curled into a soft smile, a sense of relief washing over him. But more than that, he was intrigued. A young boy had found his watch, something incredibly valuable, and instead of keeping it, he had done the right thing. That kind of honesty was rare, even among adults. Keanu felt a sudden, overwhelming urge to meet this boy, to thank him in person. It wasn't just about the watch anymore. It was about recognizing the integrity of a kid who had no idea whose watch he'd found and still chose to do the right thing. "Let's go meet him," Keanu said, grabbing his jacket. "I want to thank him properly." The ride to the police station was filled with quiet anticipation. Keanu, a man who had met countless people in his lifetime, fans, colleagues, strangers from all walks of life, felt an unusual excitement building in his chest. There was something about this boy's honesty that resonated deeply with him. It reminded him of his own struggles, his own moments of choosing integrity over convenience. When they arrived, Officer Daniels greeted them with a smile, clearly aware of the unusual nature of the situation. "Mr. Reeves," he said, shaking Keanu's hand firmly, "we're glad you're here. That boy, Ethan, he's something special." Keanu chuckled softly, his curiosity growing. "I'd like to meet him. Can you arrange that?" Officer Daniels nodded, picking up the phone. "I think we can make that happen." And just like that, the wheels were set in motion for a meeting that would alter the course of Ethan's life forever. Neither of them knew it yet, but this was more than just a simple act of returning a lost item. It was the beginning of a journey filled with unexpected twists, heartfelt moments, and lessons about the power of honesty and kindness in a world that often overlooked them. The unexpected meeting. Ethan was halfway through his math homework when the announcement crackled over the school's aging intercom system. The principal's voice, usually calm and steady, carried an unfamiliar edge of excitement as it echoed through the classroom. "Ethan Carter, please report to the front office immediately." The entire room turned to look at him. His classmates, noses buried in textbooks just moments before, now stared wide-eyed, whispering among themselves. Ethan's heart began to race. He wasn't the kind of kid who got called to the office. He was a good student, never causing trouble. His mind spun with possibilities. Had something happened at home? Did he forget to turn in a permission slip? Or worse, was this about the watch? His teacher, Mrs. McConnell, offered a reassuring smile. "Don't worry, Ethan. I'm sure it's nothing bad." But even her voice hinted at curiosity. Ethan gathered his things, stuffing his notebook and pencil into his backpack, and made his way out of the classroom. The hallway felt unusually long and empty, each step echoing off the linoleum floor. As he approached the office, he could feel his pulse pounding in his ears. When he pushed open the door to the main office, his mother was standing there, her face flushed with an excitement she clearly couldn't hide. But what made Ethan stop in his tracks wasn't his mother. It was the tall man standing beside her. The man wore a simple black jacket, sunglasses perched on his nose despite the indoor lighting, and his dark hair was slightly tousled, as if he'd just come in from the wind. But Ethan recognized him immediately. It was impossible not to. This was Keanu Reeves. The Keanu Reeves, the actor from the movies his dad loved, the guy who always seemed like the coolest, kindest person in every interview Ethan had ever seen on TV. For a moment, Ethan thought his mind was playing tricks on him. Why would Keanu Reeves be standing in his school office, next to his mom, as if this was the most normal thing in the world? "Ethan," his mom said, her voice trembling with excitement, "I'd like you to meet Mr. Keanu Reeves." Ethan blinked, his mouth slightly open as he tried to process the situation. "Wait, the Keanu Reeves," he finally managed to say, his voice cracking slightly in disbelief. Keanu smiled, his trademark warm, humble grin spreading across his face. "Yep, that's me," he said, extending a hand toward Ethan. "And you, my friend, found something that means a lot to me." Ethan stared at the outstretched hand for a moment before snapping out of his daze and shaking it. Keanu's grip was firm but gentle, and there was a calm, kind energy about him that immediately put Ethan at ease. Well, as much ease as a 10-year-old could feel when meeting a famous movie star unexpectedly. "The watch," Ethan whispered, realization dawning on him. "It was yours." Keanu nodded, his eyes softening. "Yeah, that watch is really special to me. It was a gift from someone who believed in me when I was just starting out. Losing it felt like losing a piece of my past." He paused, his gaze steady on Ethan. "But you found it, and turned it in without knowing who it belonged to. That says a lot about the kind of person you are." Ethan felt a rush of pride and embarrassment all at once. He didn't know what to say. He hadn't done it for praise or recognition. He'd just done what he thought was right. I knew someone would miss it," Ethan said quietly, shrugging his shoulders. "It didn't feel like mine to keep." Keanu's smile widened. "That kind of honesty is rare, Ethan. And I think it deserves to be recognized." Ethan's mother, who had been standing quietly by, finally spoke up. "Mr. Reeves asked if he could take you out for lunch to thank you properly." Her voice wavered with excitement, clearly still processing the surreal nature of the situation. "If you're okay with that, of course." Ethan's heart skipped a beat. Lunch with Keanu Reeves. This was something out of a dream, the kind of story you tell your friends, and they'd never believe you. "I'd love that," Ethan said, grinning from ear to ear. An hour later, they were sitting in a cozy booth at the local diner, a spot known for its classic American fare and friendly atmosphere. The waitress had nearly dropped her notepad when she realized who was sitting at one of her tables, but Keanu, ever the humble celebrity, had quickly put her at ease with his easygoing charm. As they waited for their food, Ethan had ordered a cheeseburger with extra fries, and Keanu had opted for a simple turkey sandwich. They talked. But it wasn't the kind of conversation Ethan expected. Keanu didn't talk about Hollywood or his movies unless Ethan asked. Instead, he was more interested in Ethan's life, his school, his friends, his dreams. "So, what do you want to be when you grow up?" Keanu asked, taking a sip of his iced tea. Ethan thought for a moment, twirling a straw wrapper between his fingers. "I'm not sure yet," he admitted. "Maybe a doctor, or a firefighter. I just want to help people, you know." Keanu nodded thoughtfully. "Helping people is one of the best things you can do with your life. The world needs more people like you, Ethan." Ethan's cheeks flushed with pride. It wasn't every day that someone like Keanu Reeves told you that you were the kind of person the world needed. Their food arrived, and as they ate, the conversation continued to flow easily. Keanu told stories about his own childhood, about growing up without much, but always trying to do the right thing. He spoke about his struggles, the people who had helped him along the way, and how important it was to stay true to yourself, no matter what life threw at you. Ethan listened intently, hanging on every word. It wasn't just the fact that Keanu Reeves was famous. It was the way he spoke, the sincerity in his voice, and the wisdom in his stories. Ethan felt like he was learning something important, something he'd carry with him for the rest of his life. After they finished their meal, Keanu reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small, unassuming envelope. He slid it across the table to Ethan, his eyes twinkling with a mix of mischief and sincerity. "What's this?" Ethan asked, his curiosity piqued. "Just a little something to say thank you," Keanu replied. Ethan opened the envelope and gasped. Inside was a check. Not just any check, but one made out for an amount that made his heart skip a beat. It wasn't just enough for a new bike or some video games. It was enough to change his life. Enough to pay for college, to follow his dreams, whatever they might be. I can't take this," Ethan stammered, his eyes wide. "It's too much." Keanu chuckled softly, shaking his head. "Ethan, you didn't hesitate to do the right thing, even when you didn't know anyone was watching. That's worth more than money. But this," he tapped the envelope gently, "this is just to make sure you have every opportunity to keep being the amazing person you already are. Think of it as a scholarship for whatever you decide to do." Ethan looked at his mom, who was wiping tears from her eyes. She nodded, her voice catching as she whispered, "It's okay, Ethan. You deserve this." With a deep breath, Ethan accepted the envelope, his heart swelling with gratitude. He realized then that doing the right thing hadn't just brought back a lost watch, it had opened a door to a future brighter than he'd ever imagined. As they left the diner, Keanu placed a hand on Ethan's shoulder. "I have a feeling this is just the beginning for you, Ethan," he said with a smile. "Keep believing in yourself. You've already made the world a better place, and I know you're going to keep doing that." Ethan beamed, feeling like the luckiest kid in the world. But more than that, he felt proud. Proud of his honesty, proud of his choices, and proud of the unexpected friendship he'd found in the most unlikely of circumstances. Little did he know, this was only the start of an incredible journey that would touch more lives than he could ever imagine. An offer like no other. The days following Ethan's unbelievable lunch with Keanu Reeves were a blur of excitement and disbelief. At first, it felt like a dream, a surreal experience that would eventually fade into a distant memory. But the reality of what had happened sank in with each passing hour. The story of Ethan's honesty and his unexpected meeting with a Hollywood superstar had spread like wildfire through their small town, igniting a buzz that no one could ignore. It started small. A few of Ethan's classmates approached him in the hallways, their eyes wide with curiosity and awe. "Dude, you had lunch with Keanu Reeves," one kid asked, as if trying to confirm the impossible. Another chimed in, "Did he really give you a check? Like, for real money?" Ethan, always modest and a little shy about the attention, just nodded and gave a small smile. He wasn't interested in bragging. For him, the best part wasn't the money or the fame. It was knowing he'd done the right thing and meeting someone who genuinely appreciated it. But the story didn't stay within the school walls for long. By the end of the week, local news stations had picked it up, running headlines like "Honest Young Boy Returns, Lost Watch to Keanu Reeves," and "Local Kid's Kindness Catches the Eye of Hollywood Star." Reporters even showed up at Ethan's house, their vans parked along the quiet street, cameras ready as they politely requested interviews. At first, Ethan felt overwhelmed. He wasn't used to being in the spotlight, but his mom, always calm and supportive, reminded him that this was an opportunity to show people the importance of honesty. "You don't have to do anything you're not comfortable with," Sarah said, gently brushing Ethan's hair back from his forehead as they sat together on the couch, watching the evening news replay their story. "But if you want to share what happened, maybe you'll inspire someone else to do the right thing when they're faced with a choice." That idea stuck with Ethan. Maybe his story could make a difference. The following week, Ethan and his mother agreed to a few interviews, appearing on local TV and even doing a video call with a national morning show. Each time, Ethan recounted his story with humility, emphasizing that he never expected anything in return. "I just thought someone would be missing their watch," he'd say, shrugging as if it were the simplest thing in the world. But to everyone watching, it was much more than that. It was a reminder that integrity still existed, even in the smallest corners of the world. As the media attention grew, so did the impact of Ethan's story. Letters began arriving at their modest home, handwritten notes from strangers across the country who had been touched by Ethan's honesty. Some shared their own stories of doing the right thing. Others simply wanted to thank him for reminding them that kindness mattered. There were even small gifts, books, tokens of appreciation, and once, a beautifully crafted compass from a retired sailor who wrote, "May this always guide you in the right direction, just like your heart does." Ethan treasured every letter, every gesture, but amidst all the attention, he stayed grounded. His parents made sure of that. His father, Michael, was especially adamant about keeping life as normal as possible. "Fame comes and goes," he said one evening as they sat around the dinner table. "But who you are, that's what lasts." Despite his parents' efforts to keep things normal, life was about to take another unexpected turn. One chilly Saturday morning, about 2 weeks after the story had first broken, Ethan was playing in the backyard when his mom called out from the kitchen window. "Ethan, you've got a letter. It's from Mr. Reeves." Ethan's heart skipped a beat. He dashed inside, his sneakers thudding against the wooden porch, and took the envelope from his mother's outstretched hand. It was a simple, cream-colored envelope, but the handwriting on the front was unmistakably neat and careful. His name was written in bold letters, Ethan Carter. With trembling fingers, Ethan opened the envelope and pulled out a letter written on crisp, high-quality paper. He could hardly believe his eyes as he began to read. "Dear Ethan, I've been thinking a lot about our lunch and the incredible choice you made. You didn't just return a watch. You reminded me, and the world, of the power of integrity. I've met a lot of people in my life, but few have impressed me as much as you did with your honesty and humility. I'd like to extend an invitation to you and your family. I'm currently working on a new project, and I'd love for you to visit the set and see how movies are made. But more than that, I'd like to offer you something bigger, a chance to be part of something special." Enclosed with this letter is an official invitation to a scholarship program I'm starting in your honor, the Ethan Carter Scholarship for Young Leaders. This program will help kids like you, young people with integrity and heart, get the opportunities they deserve, no matter where they come from. Your honesty didn't just bring my watch back, it inspired a movement. I hope you'll be part of it. Looking forward to seeing you soon. Keanu. Ethan's hands shook as he finished reading the letter. His eyes darted to the second sheet of paper in the envelope, which detailed the scholarship program. His name was right there, in bold letters at the top, the Ethan Carter Scholarship for Young Leaders. The program aimed to help kids from all backgrounds pursue their dreams, providing funding for education, mentorship opportunities, and leadership training. Ethan's mom read the letter over his shoulder, her eyes welling with tears. "Oh, Ethan," she whispered, pulling him into a tight hug. "Do you realize what this means?" Ethan could barely speak. It wasn't just about him anymore. His simple act of honesty had sparked something much bigger than he could have ever imagined. He wasn't just helping himself, he was helping kids all over the country. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. Keanu followed through on his promise, flying Ethan and his family out to visit the set of his new film. It was an experience unlike any other. Ethan got to see how movies were made, from the giant cameras to the intricate sets. He met the cast and crew, and even got to sit in the director's chair for a few minutes. But the best part was the time he spent with Keanu. They talked about life, about dreams, and about the importance of staying true to yourself no matter what. During one of their conversations, Keanu said something that stuck with Ethan. "You know, it's not about how big the gesture is," he said, his voice calm and thoughtful. "It's about the intention behind it. You didn't return that watch because you thought it would lead to all this. You did it because it was the right thing to do. That's what makes you special." Ethan took those words to heart. When they returned home, he threw himself into helping launch the scholarship program. He spoke at schools, shared his story with other kids, and encouraged them to believe in themselves and do the right thing, even when no one was watching. The Ethan Carter Scholarship for Young Leaders quickly gained traction, attracting attention from philanthropists, educators, and even other celebrities. Within a year, hundreds of kids across the country had received scholarships, each one inspired by Ethan's simple act of honesty. But through it all, Ethan remained the same humble, kind-hearted boy he'd always been. He knew that life wasn't about fame or fortune. It was about making a difference, one small act at a time. And as he lay in bed at night, staring at the ceiling and thinking about everything that had happened, he couldn't help but smile. He never could have imagined that finding a lost watch in the park would lead to all of this. But he was grateful for the opportunities, for the friendships, and for the chance to inspire others. Because at the end of the day, Ethan knew one thing for certain. Doing the right thing wasn't always easy, but it was always worth it. The ripple effect. Ethan's life had already transformed in ways he could barely comprehend. But the true extent of his simple act of honesty was only just beginning to unfold. The Ethan Carter Scholarship for Young Leaders had been launched with great fanfare. And while Ethan was the face of the movement, the impact was spreading far beyond his small town. What had started as a quiet gesture, a young boy returning a lost watch, was now rippling outward, touching lives across the country and inspiring a wave of kindness that no one could have predicted. The first real sign of this ripple effect came in the form of an unexpected letter. It arrived one chilly morning, tucked among the usual stack of bills and advertisements. The envelope was plain, but when Ethan's mother opened it and read the first few lines, she called him into the kitchen immediately. "Ethan," she said, her voice trembling slightly, "you need to see this." Ethan wiped his hands on his jeans and took the letter, his eyes scanning the neatly handwritten words. It was from a boy named Liam, who lived in a city several states away. Liam's story was strikingly similar to Ethan's. He had found a wallet stuffed with cash while walking home from school, and despite being tempted to keep it, had chosen to turn it in to the local police station. But what made Liam's letter different was what he wrote next. "I saw your story on the news," Liam wrote. "Before that, I don't know if I would have done the right thing. But hearing about you, seeing how you made the choice to be honest, even when no one was watching, it made me want to be like you." Ethan felt a lump form in his throat as he finished reading. He had never imagined that his actions could inspire someone else to make a similar choice. It was a powerful realization, one that filled him with both pride and a deep sense of responsibility. But Liam's letter wasn't the only one. Soon, more letters began to arrive, emails, messages on social media, even phone calls to the house. Stories poured in from all over the country. A girl in Texas who found a lost dog and spent days tracking down its owner. A teenager in Florida who discovered an envelope full of money in a parking lot and returned it to the elderly man who had dropped it. A young boy in New York who turned in a lost cell phone and ended up reuniting it with a woman who had photos of her late husband stored on it. Each story was unique, but they all shared a common thread. the desire to do the right thing, inspired by Ethan's example. The media picked up on this new wave of kindness, dubbing it the Ethan effect. News anchors spoke about how a single act of honesty from a 10-year-old boy had sparked a nationwide movement of integrity and goodwill. It was a story that resonated with people from all walks of life, reminding them of the importance of character in a world that often seemed driven by self-interest. As the story grew, so did the scholarship program. Donations poured in from unexpected sources: business owners, celebrities, and even ordinary people who wanted to support young leaders like Ethan. The program expanded, offering not just scholarships, but also mentorship opportunities, leadership workshops, and community service initiatives. Schools across the country began incorporating Ethan Carter Day into their calendars, dedicating a day each year to teaching students about honesty, kindness, and the power of small actions to make a big difference. Ethan found himself busier than ever. When he wasn't in school, he was traveling with his family to different cities, speaking at events, and meeting other young people who had been inspired by his story. He never grew tired of hearing their stories, of seeing the spark in their eyes when they talked about the good they had done. It was humbling to realize that his actions had encouraged others to believe in the power of doing the right thing. But with the growing attention came challenges. Not everyone was supportive of Ethan's newfound fame. Some of his classmates, once friendly and familiar, began to treat him differently. A few whispered behind his back, calling him a show-off or claiming he only did the right thing because he knew it would make him famous. Ethan tried not to let it bother him, but it wasn't always easy. One afternoon, as he was walking home from school, he overheard a group of older boys talking. "Yeah, that Ethan kid just got lucky," one of them sneered. "Bet he wouldn't have turned in that watch if he knew it wasn't Keanu Reeves." Ethan felt his cheeks burn, but he kept walking, pretending he hadn't heard. When he got home, he tossed his backpack on the floor and sank onto the couch, feeling deflated. His mom noticed immediately. "What's wrong, sweetie?" she asked, sitting down beside him. Ethan hesitated for a moment before blurting out, "Some kids at school think I only did it for the attention. They don't believe I would have returned the watch if I knew it wasn't someone famous." Sarah took a deep breath, pulling Ethan into a comforting hug. "Ethan, people will always have opinions. Some will understand, and some won't. But you know the truth. You did the right thing because that's who you are, not because of who the watch belonged to. And that's what matters." Ethan nodded, but the words still stung. It wasn't until later that evening, when he received a surprise phone call, that his spirits began to lift again. It was Keanu Reeves. "Hey, buddy." Keanu's familiar, calming voice came through the line. "Your mom said you've been having a tough day." Ethan's heart swelled. "Yeah, some kids at school think I only returned the watch because it was yours." Keanu chuckled softly. "You know, people said the same things about me when I started out in acting. They thought I was just lucky, or that I'd never make it. But I kept going because I knew who I was, and I believed in what I was doing. You've got something special, Ethan, and don't let anyone make you doubt that. You're inspiring people, and that's not something everyone gets to do." Hearing those words from someone he admired so deeply made all the difference. Keanu's encouragement reminded Ethan that staying true to himself was more important than the opinions of a few doubters. In the months that followed, Ethan continued to embrace his role as a leader and role model. He spoke at schools, attended community events, and even helped organize a national youth integrity conference, where young people from across the country gathered to share their stories and ideas about how to make the world a better place. At the conference, Ethan met a girl named Amara, who had started a community garden in her neighborhood to help feed families in need. He met Louis, a teenager who had raised money to rebuild a local library after it was damaged in a storm. And there was Sophie, who had started a mentorship program for younger students struggling in school. Each of them had been inspired by Ethan's story, and now they were creating their own ripples of kindness and change. As he stood on stage at the closing ceremony, looking out at the sea of faces, Ethan felt a deep sense of gratitude. He realized that while the watch had been the catalyst, it was the people, the connections, the shared stories, the collective belief in doing good that had truly made the difference. "This isn't just about me," Ethan said, his voice steady and confident. "It's about all of us. Every time we choose honesty, every time we help someone, we're making the world a better place. You don't have to be famous or rich to make a difference. You just have to care." The audience erupted in applause, but Ethan didn't need the cheers to feel validated. He knew in his heart that he was living a life of purpose, one small act at a time. Back in his hometown, things slowly returned to normal. The media attention eventually faded, and the cameras stopped showing up at his door. But the lessons Ethan had learned, and the movement he had inspired, continued to grow. Years later, when Ethan was preparing to head off to college, his tuition fully covered by the scholarship program he had helped create, he looked back on the journey that had started with a simple walk in the park. He still kept in touch with Keanu, who had become a lifelong mentor and friend, and he still received letters from people who had been touched by his story. But most importantly, Ethan never forgot the feeling of holding that watch in his hands, knowing he had a choice to make, and choosing to do the right thing. Because in the end, it wasn't about the watch. It was about the ripple effect of kindness, the power of integrity, and the belief that even the smallest actions could change the world. Challenges and growth. As time passed, Ethan's story continued to inspire people far and wide, but not everything that followed was easy. Life had a way of balancing the good with the challenging, and Ethan quickly learned that even when you do the right thing, there are obstacles to face. Fame, even the kind born from integrity, came with pressures that neither Ethan nor his family had anticipated. And as he grew older, those pressures would test not only his resolve, but also his understanding of what it truly meant to lead by example. In the beginning, everything had felt exciting and surreal. The scholarship program was flourishing, and Ethan was traveling across the country, speaking to students, educators, and even politicians about the importance of honesty and integrity. He found himself standing on stages in front of hundreds, sometimes thousands of people, his voice amplified through microphones as he shared the story that had started it all. Each time, he emphasized that doing the right thing wasn't about recognition. It was about who you were when no one was watching. But as the applause faded after each event and the lights dimmed, Ethan would return home to a world that wasn't always as kind. Fame had changed how some people saw him. While many admired him, others grew envious, assuming he had stumbled into success by sheer luck. The kids at school, once his friends, had started treating him differently. Some were distant, unsure how to relate to the boy whose face they saw on TV. Others were outright hostile, convinced that Ethan thought he was better than everyone else. It was a chilly autumn afternoon when Ethan experienced one of the toughest days of his young life. He was walking through the school courtyard, his backpack slung over one shoulder, when he overheard a group of boys from his class talking loudly near the lockers. "Look, it's the famous Ethan Carter," one of them sneered, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "I bet he's too good to hang out with us regular kids now." Another boy chuckled, nudging his friend. "Yeah, maybe if we find a lost watch, we can be on TV too." The words stung more than Ethan expected. He hadn't changed, at least, not in the way they seemed to think. But their words made him question whether sharing his story so publicly had been the right choice. For the first time since that day in the park, he felt unsure of himself. When he got home, he found his mom in the kitchen, humming softly as she prepared dinner. He dropped his backpack by the door and sank into a chair at the table, his usual energy replaced by a heavy silence. Sarah turned around, immediately noticing the look on her son's face. "Ethan, what's wrong?" Ethan hesitated, then finally spoke. "I don't get it, Mom. I did the right thing. I didn't want any of this attention, but now everyone treats me like I think I'm better than them. I don't know how to make them see that I'm still just me. Sarah dried her hands on a dish towel and sat down across from him. She reached out, placing her hand gently over his. Ethan, sometimes when people see someone else doing something good, it makes them uncomfortable. Not because you've done anything wrong, but because it reminds them of the choices they've made or wish they'd made differently. But you can't control how other people feel. You can only control how you respond. Ethan sighed, staring at the tabletop. But what if they're right? What if I wouldn't have done the right thing if I knew the watch wasn't important, or didn't belong to someone famous? His mom squeezed his hand gently. You're asking the right questions, Ethan. But deep down, you know the answer. You turned in that watch because you knew it was the right thing to do, not because of who it belonged to. And the people who matter, the people who really know you, understand that. Despite his mom's comforting words, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling of doubt that had settled in his heart. It followed him for days, casting a shadow over the things that had once brought him joy. He stopped volunteering for speaking engagements and began declining invitations to events. The world that had once felt bright and full of promise now seemed heavy and overwhelming. It wasn't until a letter arrived in the mail that something began to shift inside him. The envelope was plain, addressed in simple handwriting to Ethan Carter. There was no return address, but the postmark indicated it had come from across the country. Curious, Ethan opened it and began to read. Dear Ethan, you don't know me, but I wanted to thank you. My little brother, Jack, found out about your story a few months ago. Jack's been having a tough time. He's always struggled with doing the right thing, especially when it felt like no one was paying attention. But after hearing about you, something changed. Last week, Jack found a wallet at the park. It was full of cash, more money than he's ever seen. And you know what? He turned it in to the police. When I asked him why, he said, because Ethan Carter, we've done the same thing. I just wanted you to know that you're making a difference, even if it doesn't always feel like it. Not everyone will understand, but the people who need your story the most, they see you. They believe in you. Thank you for being you. Sincerely, Olivia. Ethan read the letter twice, his eyes blurring slightly with unshed tears. It was as if Olivia's words had reached into the very core of his doubts and pulled them into the light. For the first time in weeks, he felt a spark of the old confidence return. It wasn't about the applause, the media, or the attention. It was about people like Jack, who needed a reminder that doing the right thing mattered, even when no one was watching. Ethan folded the letter carefully and placed it in a box he kept in his room, a box filled with letters, notes, and small tokens from people whose lives had been touched by his story. Each one was a reminder of why he had started this journey. And now, more than ever, he realized how important it was to keep going. With renewed determination, Ethan returned to the work he loved. He started accepting invitations again, speaking at schools and events, but this time with a deeper understanding of the responsibility that came with his role. He shared not just his successes, but also his struggles, openly talking about the doubts and challenges he'd faced. And in doing so, he connected with even more people, showing them that honesty and integrity weren't just about grand gestures. They were about facing life's challenges with courage and resilience. As he grew older, Ethan continued to balance the demands of school, family, and his role as a leader in the scholarship program. He faced setbacks and failures, just like anyone else, but each experience taught him something new about himself and the world around him. By the time he reached high school, Ethan had become more than just the boy who returned a lost watch. He was a mentor, a leader, and a friend to many. His scholarship program had expanded internationally, helping young people around the world pursue their dreams while staying true to their values. And through it all, Ethan never forgot the lesson he'd learned during those challenging years. Doing the right thing wasn't always easy, and it didn't always bring immediate rewards, but it was the foundation of a life filled with purpose, connection, and the quiet satisfaction of knowing that he had made the world a better place, one small act at a time. A future written in honesty. Years passed, But the ripple effect of Ethan Carter's small act of honesty continued to shape not only his life, but the lives of countless others around the world. What had started with the simple return of a lost watch had blossomed into something far greater, a legacy of integrity, compassion, and leadership that transcended the boy who had started it all. And now, standing at the threshold of adulthood, Ethan was about to take the next step on his remarkable journey. It was a bright, clear morning when Ethan awoke on the day of his college graduation. The sun streamed through his bedroom window, casting golden rays across the walls that were covered with photos, letters, and mementos from his incredible journey. As he sat on the edge of his bed, tying his shoes, he glanced at the small wooden box on his nightstand, the same box where he had kept Olivia's letter all those years ago. It had grown heavier with time, filled with the stories and gratitude of people whose lives he had touched. Ethan's heart swelled with emotion as he reflected on how far he had come. He had entered college with the support of the scholarship program he helped create, but he had never let that define him. Instead, he worked tirelessly, excelling in his studies while continuing to advocate for honesty and leadership among his peers. His major in social entrepreneurship was more than just a field of study, it was a calling. He dreamed of finding new ways to empower young people, to create opportunities for those who believed in doing good in the world. Downstairs, his family was bustling with excitement. His mother, Sarah, had been up since dawn, preparing a celebratory breakfast, while his father, Michael, was busy packing the car with everything they'd need for the graduation ceremony. His younger sister, Emma, who had been just a toddler when Ethan's story first made headlines, was now a bright, spirited teenager, brimming with pride for her big brother. As they drove to the university campus, Ethan couldn't help but feel a mixture of nerves and anticipation. Graduating from college was a milestone in itself, but today was special for another reason. He had been chosen to deliver the commencement address, an honor that reflected not just his academic achievements, but the impact of his story on the world. When they arrived at the campus, the air buzzed with excitement. Graduates in caps and gowns milled about, hugging friends and posing for photos with their families. Ethan slipped into his gown, the fabric cool against his skin, and adjusted his cap in the mirror. As he did, he caught sight of a familiar figure approaching him from across the courtyard. It was Keanu Reeves. Despite the years that had passed, Keanu looked much the same, humble, kind, and grounded. His presence was a reminder of the day Ethan's life had changed forever. But more than that, he was a friend and mentor who had stood by Ethan through every twist and turn of his journey. "Hey, Ethan," Keanu greeted, pulling him into a warm embrace. "I wouldn't miss this for the world." Ethan grinned. "I'm really glad you're here. None of this would have happened without you." Keanu chuckled softly. "No, none of this would have happened without you. You made the choice. You set the example. I just happened to lose my watch." They shared a laugh, but Ethan knew there was truth in Keanu's words. It had been his choice to return the watch, to stand by his values even when no one was watching. And now, as he prepared to step onto the stage, he felt the weight and the privilege of that responsibility more than ever. The ceremony was held in the university's sprawling outdoor amphitheater, surrounded by lush green trees and rows upon rows of proud families. As the graduates filed in, Ethan scanned the crowd and spotted familiar faces, his family, his friends, and even some of the young people who had benefited from the scholarship program. Seeing them there filled him with a sense of gratitude and purpose. When it was time for the commencement address, Ethan made his way to the podium, the applause washing over him like a wave. He paused for a moment, taking in the sea of faces before him, and then began to speak. "Good morning, everyone," he started, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "Today is not just a celebration of our achievements, but a reflection of the choices we've made to get here. And if there's one thing I've learned on my journey, it's that the smallest choices can have the biggest impact." He shared his story, not just the moment he returned the lost watch, but the challenges, doubts, and lessons that had followed. He spoke about the importance of integrity, of staying true to your values, even when it's difficult, and of the ripple effect that a single act of kindness can create. Doing the right thing isn't always easy, Ethan continued, his eyes sweeping across the audience. Sometimes it feels like no one notices, but the truth is, our actions matter more than we realize. They inspire others, they build trust, and they shape the world we live in. Every one of us has the power to make a difference, not by being perfect, but by being honest, compassionate, and courageous in the face of challenges. As he spoke, Ethan felt a deep connection with the audience. He saw tears in the eyes of some, nods of agreement from others. And when he finished, the applause was thunderous, not just for his words, but for the life he had lived and the example he had set. After the ceremony, Ethan found himself surrounded by well-wishers, professors, classmates, and even strangers who had been moved by his speech. But it was the quiet moments with his family and Keanu that meant the most. "I'm proud of you, son," Michael said, his voice thick with emotion. "Not just for graduating, but for the person you've become." Sarah hugged him tightly. "You've always had a good heart, Ethan, and you've shown the world what that means." Later that evening, as the celebrations wound down, Ethan sat on the porch of his family's home, the cool night air wrapping around him like a blanket. Keanu joined him, 2 mugs of tea in hand. "You know," Keanu said, handing Ethan a mug, "this is just the beginning." Ethan smiled, sipping his tea. "I know. And I'm ready for whatever comes next." And he was, because Ethan understood that life wasn't about the accolades or the attention. It was about the choices we make every day, the integrity we carry with us, and the impact we have on the people around us. His story had started with a lost watch, but it had become so much more. A testament to the power of honesty, the strength of character, and the belief that even the smallest actions can change the world. As he gazed up at the star-filled sky, Ethan felt a deep sense of peace. The future was unwritten, but he knew one thing for certain. He would continue to lead with honesty, compassion, and courage, no matter where life took him. And in doing so, he would inspire others to do the same, creating a legacy that would endure long after the applause had faded. Because in the end, it wasn't about the watch. It was about the choice. And Ethan Carter had chosen to make the world a better place, one honest act at a time.